We knew she had a story. I could tell because every person that walks through these doors, no matter who you are sitting here tonight, you have a story. You may not know it, you may not be ready to tell it, but you have a story that needs to be told at some point in your life. And we knew that Sylvia had a story, and we just waited and waited and waited, and we just waited and waited and waited. And finally one day she came to me and she said, "Pastor, I'm ready to tell it. I'm ready to tell my story." And that's why this service is happening tonight, because not only is she ready to tell it, but we're ready to hear it. Because we know that God has done a tremendous work in her life, and we want to give God all the glory tonight. So come on, let's welcome Sister Sylvia Wheeler to the platform tonight.
I gotta hold the phone.
Oh, this is scary. So I'm gonna take my glasses off because I do not want to see y'all. I want y'all to see me, but I don't want to see y'all. Also, if you're taking pictures, be sure you get my skinny side. Okay, so most people know me here. I hope y'all can hear me. I hear me, so there you go. Most people know me here. My name is Sylvia. I am the daughter to Peggy, Gerard, and my father who's passed away, Mr. Joe. I have a husband. We've been married a long time, like decades now. And we have 4 kids. Before I start this, I just want everybody to know that whatever is said in this, a lot of this has been worked over, it's been healed, like the pastor mentioned. So whatever you hear, please don't hold it against anybody, especially my mom. And so whatever you take away from this, I want you to take away that my mom is my best friend, and I love her dearly. So we'll start from the very beginning. And we won't go on into all the details because we all know how babies are made, okay? But from the beginning, the devil was out to get me. And, my mom used to tell me all the time, I had this one uncle that was just bound and determined that she needed to get an abortion. Praise God she didn't. And then the pregnancy went further along. And another uncle started saying, well, I know a couple that's been trying to have kids for a long time and they just can't get pregnant. You should give your child to them through adoption. No, I'm keeping her. And so she ended up keeping me. And the funny thing is, the couple that he was trying to give me to, they had a child the same day I was born. Yes. So, yes. He was my ex-boyfriend back in the day, too. Wow. But my parents met in a bar. And, it's not the ideal place to meet your future spouse, but that's where it happened. My grandmother liked to go out and drink, and they came across him there. The bar was named Crickets, if I remember right. And so began the long journey of alcohol and just everything. My mom had me when she was young. She was older than I was when I had my first one, but my dad didn't always make the best decisions. My dad was very abusive when he was drinking. But when he was sober, he was amazing. He was such a good dad. We went fishing, we did fun things together. But when he picked up the beer can, the Bud Light and the Budweiser, he was a totally different person. And I was just a baby when I was taken away from my parents. Because, what do babies do? They cry. When they're hungry, when they're hurting, when they want their diaper changed, all these things, babies cry. And, I had my child, Aubrey, and she tried to give me the book. I started to bring it tonight, but I decided to leave that stuff in the past. Just leave it there. Let y'all see it. I said, no, I can tell you. You're just going to take my word for it. But then when I had Aiden, she gave me this baby book. Y'all, she tricked me. And I was reading it one day, and I was reading about how CPS came in and took me away because I was covered in bruises from where he'd pinched me because I was crying. And you can only imagine, I probably cried more, which resulted in more pinches. Anyway, somebody called CPS, and I was removed from home. And Mama fought like crazy to get me back. You know, we're talking back in the day, in the 1980s, y'all. There were still things like her social worker told her, you got to do this, 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 and this. Her and my dad, not just her. But if y'all don't get married, I'm going to make a recommendation to the judge that y'all don't get her back. And so she had to marry my dad to get me back. And they went on to have Rodney, and we continued to live in what a lot of people would not live in. We lived in a lot of just run-down, raggedy trailers. I remember a time when, you know, we always got Christmases and birthdays, but the next day they were going back to Walmart to get him money to drink beer. And I remember a time when the well, we had one place that had well water. He pawned the well to go get money to drink beer. And, you know, I don't want y'all to think bad about my dad. Like I said, I've had healing. But when you're in addiction, you'll do anything to get that next, whatever it is you're addicted to. And so, you know, Mama would try so hard. She worked, and she would hide money. He would find it. She hid it under the trailer, like under dirt or something. I don't know. He found it. Like, he was Houdini. He always found the money. And so, eventually, Mama got tired of it. There was just too much. There was a cop, I think he was a cop, named Pete Bowen, and he told her, if you want to keep them kids, you are going to have to leave him. You're going to have to go. There's no sense in this. And so guess what? She got in the newspaper, because, you know, back then we didn't have Facebook. It was newspapers, classified ads. And she found an ad for a dairy farm in Louisiana. And so he found out the night before that we were leaving, and I don't remember this stuff. I don't remember it. But she told me that he was so mad. He was so mad that she was leaving, taking the kids. He was upset. I'm not going to let you do that. You can't raise those kids by yourself. He didn't want us. He just wanted to control. He wanted to control her. He didn't want to lose what he thought he had. And so he went out drinking, came back, and according to Mama, he started to choke her and was bound and determined to kill her. And this is the part I don't remember. She said, I came in with the frying pan and hit him on the head, and we got the heck up out of Dodge. And we went to Mama's house and came back the next day with an uncle and got our stuff and made a long journey to Louisiana. In actuality, it's only about 6 hours, but I think it took us like all day, 12. It took forever. We had a cat named Boots. He was black and white. I don't know why we called him Boots, because his feet were white. They were not black. But anyway, then we had a cat named Blackie, and his feet were white. Also, he should have been named Socks, but whatever. But Boots rode in a box all the way to Louisiana. Bobby didn't want him out. We didn't want him out. We was afraid to get loose and run away. So we had this Dodge Dakota pulling this trailer with this hatchback car on the back, packs full of clothes and stuff, and a cat in the box. Some of us rode in the car on the back of the trailer, and some of us rode in the truck. And we got there, and we let Boots out, and he never went in another box, I'm telling y'all. You try to put him in a box, and you would not believe how wide his all four legs could spread. But, you know, at first when we got there, it was so peaceful. Louisiana was a place where we didn't have to worry at night. We didn't have to worry if we'd have water to take a bath. We didn't have to worry about having the lights on. Our trailer was provided through the job she took, and it was just peaceful. And I remember asking Mama when I was young, I said, Mama, do I have to call him Daddy? I said, I don't want to call him Daddy. And that's not how daddies act. So why would can I just call him Joe? So from that day on, me and Rodney started to call him Joe. And, you know, Mama was still terrified that he would come and get us. So anytime we talked to him, she was taking us to payphones like it was top secret. Could not be traced. I mean, I think that's even before Star 69 came out. Anyway, it was good at first in Louisiana. Mama milked cows. in the barn twice a day. Me and Rodney were running all over the place out there. There was like fields for days. Something called a turtle pond. We went down there all the time. We were swinging from vines, snakes, turtles, skunks, everything. We could have died, but you know, that's Louisiana. It's wild. But we made it, and Mama worked with a guy that was, he always seemed a little funny, but he had colored paper and colored pens, and one day she decided, for whatever reason, I don't remember the circumstances, but I do know that we thought his paper and his pens were fun. That was exciting to us, because we just had like white lined paper. We didn't have the fun paper and pens, and so he's gonna let us spend the night with him, and I was gonna get to write on his paper. He was gonna give us like 1 or 2 sheets each, I don't remember. And so me and my brother, here we go. And we get down there, and I don't know, y'all, I really try with my memory, but there's so much stuff that I just pushed and pushed and pushed down and down and down. And all I know is my brother there was a camper. It was a small camper, probably as wide as the stage. It wasn't big at all. And my brother was told to stay up on the couch. It's bedtime. And he took me back to the bed and said I was going to go to bed with him. And he put me on top of him. And there was something there in that moment. I knew it wasn't right. And I hopped up out of that bed, and I went back to where my brother was. I was like, I don't know how to explain that feeling. I knew something wrong had just happened, and I was not going back in that bedroom. And so I told him over and over, I said, you're going to have to go get my mama. We're going home. Like, we lived from here to probably where my Yukon is out there in the parking lot. I'm going home. If I have to walk there, I'm going home. I'm not staying here tonight. And I don't know whatever. I never told Mama. I just told her I didn't want to stay there. But she went snooping around in his camper one night. You know, they do their 2 a.m. shift, and at the end of it, you have to go round up the cows that didn't come. And Mama never went to round up cows, y'all. She always let other people do that. But that night, she went to round up the cows, and no, she didn't. She went on down the road to his camper, and she broke in, and she was digging in his stuff and found whatever she found. And next thing I know, he was not there anymore. He was fired. So I didn't have to worry about that ever again. But then they hired somebody else. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but just know that it was worse than the first one. There was things done that no 10 and 11-year-old girls should ever go through. You know, you're put in places with people. You bring people into your life, and you have to trust them. And if you can't trust them with your kids, they don't need to be around. And some of them you think you can trust, and they still do things that they're not supposed to. This man had an addiction. He spent a lot of Mama's money on crack. In the meantime, he's molesting me. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. He's molesting me in a very smart way. Because when I did approach Mama to tell her, she didn't believe me, y'all. She did not believe me. She took me to a doctor. There was no evidence. And she called me some names that was hurtful at the time. And he continued to be around. But that's where I started acting out. I became a very good thief and a liar. I'd steal somebody's pens or the Dr. Peppers out of the barn, and I'd smooth lie about it. That wasn't me. I didn't do that. So anyway, this went on. She ended up losing her job, and we had to go stay with him in his shack. And all the time, this is still continuing. This is still going on, and she's got her blinders on. Y'all gotta be careful with your kids. You have to. You have to be careful who you let around your kids. And anyway, one day, we had been there, I don't know, it felt like an eternity, but it was just a month or two. And we were in this little 3-room shack, and sitting in one of the rooms, his whole shack was a mess. It was nasty. Like there's stuff everywhere. And y'all wonder why I'm OCD. But he pointed at me one day and he said, "You come here." And he pointed to the other room and I said, "You ain't getting me in there. I'm not going." He said, "You better get in there," among some other language. And I said no again. And so what he does is come and take me and pick me up, and he threw me across that room, end over end, and beat the mess out of me on my back. And Mama, I don't know what her reaction was, but I'm imagining stunned. One thing a lot of people don't understand is when you have domestic violence in your home, it's scary. Like, you don't step up to them because you're gonna turn it on you. And so she didn't do nothing at first, but I did. I screamed at him to his back, and I threw a mirror. And my first thought was, that old saying, if you break a mirror, 7 years of bad luck. Well, I didn't care. My whole life had been ridiculous. I was sick of it. I didn't care. What's 7 more years? And so he came back and he beat the mess out of me again. And Mama came and pulled him off of me that time. She was not having it. And she got all our stuff. She got in her little truck and she backed it up to the back door and started slinging stuff. And she told us to stay in her sight. And he's over here apologizing. "Oh, I won't never do this. I won't never do that." And we left and we came home. But one thing about it, during that time, I told you it felt like an eternity. And Mama didn't know, or she refused to believe, whatever you want to think at the moment. Rodney knew, my brother knew something. But he was sick of it too. And one day, whatever it was, we decided we were going to murder this man. We were sick of him. Like, we're kids, we can get away with it. And so we had this plan. We were going to wake up in the middle of the night one night while he was dead asleep and take some knives and stab him to death and just be done. That would be our way out. And like, what kid has to think about murdering somebody at 11 years old to get out of a situation like that? But praise the Lord, we slept through the night. We did not go through with it. I think we were a little scared too because he was bigger than us. And anyway, the day we left, I was just so glad. I'm like, oh, it's finally over. I don't have to deal with this no more. Well, we got home, and I didn't understand at the time, but Mama told me later that when we got home, my back was black, blue, purple, brown, green, all the colors, all the way across the back, all up and down, sideways, every bit of it. She said, "Don't tell nobody. Don't take your shirt off around Mama. Just don't tell nobody." And I thought she just didn't want nobody to know. But she said later that she was afraid that I would get taken away again. Because you got to remember, I was a foster child. She thought CPS was going to come back and get me and say she did that. Not knowing that she protected me by removing us from that situation. So we come back home, and I know our pastor's from Louisiana and all, and I love him to death, but to this day, it makes my skin crawl to hear the name Louisiana or LSU. Roll Tide. But we came back home, and that is actually where my love of Roll Tide came from, because me and my brother were arguing about it one day. And he said he was going to be a state fan, and I said, well, if that's what you're going to do, well, I'm going to like Alabama. And y'all, they really sucked back then. They never won anything. But we come back home, and Mama would let us see my dad, Joe, occasionally. And we always got to see him on up in the day, so he was pretty sober. And I remember going to Johnny's Lounge a lot, up on 45. And he drifted between there and C's, Papa Top, whatever y'all remember it as, and 45, I don't remember what the name of that other one was, but he would stock the coolers in order to pay for his beer that he was going to drink there. He would do little odd jobs around, and we would go to see him at Johnny's, and he had a little camper that was like half the size of this stage that he stayed in, and he was so nice and friendly to us, and he'd give Mama money and promise the world, y'all. He would promise the world. We'd go in the beer joint and we would eat pizza with him, and he'd give us all the Coke or Dr. Pepper we wanted. It was good. And so I started having this disillusion about my dad. Or I won't say a disillusion, because he really was good when he was sober. He was a good man. But, you know, Mama still remembered how he hurt her. And she ended up meeting my stepdad. And I'm not going to say a whole lot about him tonight, but just know he was a lot about like my dad. And there was a time when I just went through in my head, like, if she wants to be with these kind of men that's always beating on her and smacking her around, why don't she just be with Joe? At least he's related to us. Obviously, she didn't know that. She laughed. But I would also I was so miserable because he did the same things my dad did to her. One thing he never did was lay a hand on me or my brother. Now his mouth, but yeah. He was real strict. We didn't get to go anywhere, do anything. Like ever, y'all have sleepovers and stuff. I did not know what that was. Like, I never had a sleepover. I never got to go anywhere. I got to go on the paper route. I got to go out in the middle of the woods and cut down woods in 10-degree weather with some old man overalls on that was 6 foot thick and load sticks up into the back of a truck. And it had to be perfect. It could not just be throwing them up there. It had to be perfect. Maybe that's where my OCD comes from.
Maybe.
But, you know, we went several years, and I would just go in and out of depression. Like, I would just say, Lord, like, why am I here? What is the purpose of this? Why do you have me going through all these things? Every man that has entered our life has been nothing but bad, nothing but alcohol, nothing but punches, nothing but misery. Could you just please take me back? Why was I ever born? And somehow, you know, I made it through. I kept fighting because I kept thinking, one of these days I'm going to be grown and I'm going to get the heck up out of here. And one thing I promised myself was I would never, ever marry a man or be with a man that did not treat me nice. I was not going to marry a Joe or a Goat or the other names that I'm not going to mention right now. That wasn't going to be me. But eventually, my stepdad straightened up, and it was only by the grace of God. My stepdad has a son, and his son just passed away 2 nights ago. But his son had a son, a 1-year-old. His name is Dylan. And we spent a lot of time with Dylan. Dylan was the joy in my life at that time. He was a baby, and he was just always smiling and so happy. And, you know, I love to see Dylan coming. And when Dylan turned 1, they had a birthday party up at the park. And, you know, I went to that. I went with Nelda. I went with them to help set it up. It was one of those few times I actually got to drive myself somewhere, because it was only like 2 miles down the road. But I got there and I'm having fun. Dylan is having fun and smashing cake and opening presents. And next thing I know, here comes Mama and Goat in the Ola J. Pickett Park. And I'm like, Mama comes in, she's got blood running down her mouth. I'm like, Mama, what is going on? Well, I just had to show him that you were where I said you were gonna be. Because he said you were out pouring around and you were not going to be here. You were doing this, whatever. Well, I said, okay, Mama, let's go home. We're calling the cops. And that in itself is scary. You don't call the cops on people who hit you. That makes them mad. There was a time right after they met when I called the cops on him. Right after they left, I ran for my life and I hid. I slept in a doghouse that night. And they did not take him that night because Mama had no physical evidence. But later she had a black eye. Her mama passed away, and guess how she had to go to the funeral? Our pictures. She had a black eye. And I ended up sneaking back up into the yard and getting in the doghouse. And then, years down the road, here we are again, another cop situation. They actually took him. And he spent the night in jail. And Lord, I was scared to death for him to come home. Because I didn't have a doghouse to hide in anymore. I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. But he didn't say nothing. He didn't do anything. But what he did do was stop drinking. Praise the Lord. And me and Rodney was able to start appreciating the man that he was. Because, like my dad, he was great when he wasn't drinking. Like, he was so good. He also loved to fish, but he fished different. My dad fished with a pole. He puts lines in the river and leaves them and comes back later. And I remember one time we were out there and he's got me running lines with him. He's like, Sylvia, pull that one up. He already seen that gar on there and I ain't never seen one. And I was like, scared, throwing that thing back. Like, what is that, a snake? He liked to play tricks on people. He still does. He called me to their house one day when I lived beside them. And he had a rattlesnake stretched out across the driveway. But, it's stuff like that. Like when he put down the bottle, I was finally able to appreciate him. And so eventually, I did get to go to prom, only because Mama took him to the casino and stayed gone all night. And then I met Gabe my senior year, and I missed a lot of days staying out too late with Gabe. And Caledonia told me that, you done missed like 60 days in the first semester, you are not graduating, you might as well stay home. And I'm like, no, I'm not, my grades were good. Like, no, that's not even fair. Well, I stayed home. And I felt so guilty the whole time because, I come from a family of brokenness. Nobody's got diplomas. Nobody's got these nice jobs. Nobody's got anything. And I wanted more for myself than that. I just felt it in my heart that I have got to go back. And so I did. But when I'd made the decision, I was already 16 days absent. And so I had to complete my second senior year of high school with already 16 days out against me, but I did it. And I have a picture to prove it and a diploma to prove it. But thank y'all. I also took the ACT that year. I wanted nothing to do with college, but something was just telling me, go ahead and take your ACT. You're gonna need it. I'm like, no, I'm not, but I guess I'll see what I'll make on it. And so I did. And the only other thing, when I got my diploma, that was all nice and everything, but I'd made a terrible decision in my high school year. I used somebody's credit card that was not mine. And, growing up poor, like here is just, to me, it was like free money. And I went on a shopping spree. I got mama's stuff, I got goat stuff, I got everybody's stuff, including myself. And I got caught. And I got a felony. And so we've always delivered newspapers. That's what she did when we came home. And I got my own paper route. And so I was working at Commercial Dispatch when me and Gabe got married. I was still on probation. And y'all, one of the stipulations of probation is that you don't leave the state. Well, let me tell y'all something about that. In Mississippi, you have to have your father and your mother sign for you to get married if you're not 21. I said, this is not gonna work because my father don't have nothing to do with me right now. I'm not going to ask him permission for nothing. Alabama lets you get married at 18 and you ain't gotta have all that. So we went to Alabama. And when I went to my probation things, I took my wedding ring off because I didn't want them to know. And so I would go in there, and as soon as I come back, I'd put it back on, like, whew, got through another one. And I went through a year and a half of that.
You remember that?
And
I told you about it.
we had Aubrey during that time, and we went on to have Aiden. And during all that time, I'm working at the dispatch. I started out as a newspaper carrier. Betty Goodman brings me into the office as an assistant manager of newspaper carriers. And then she passed away within 3 months. So I moved up to district manager a little while later. But yeah, I got tired of that. I don't like being a manager. I was young, and a lot of people would tell me I don't have to listen to you because
A little bit.
I'm older than you. And I got tired of it. So I decided to stay home. I had a vacation in May of 2007. Aiden was a year old. We just had like 14 German Shepherd puppies born. And that whole week that we were out, I didn't want to go back to work. And I went back to work over the summer. And I just didn't feel good about working. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. There was no passion there. I just wasn't in my place. I did not know that at the time. But I chose to turn in my notice in August, and September 1st of 2007, I was free from the dispatch. I went home to be a stay-at-home mom. I had checked into becoming a nurse back then and checked with my lawyer, and he told me there was no way in the world because my felony was never going away. It was there to stay. And so I gave up. I gave up on that dream and went to being a mom. And actually, Gabe started pipelining. And I like to travel too, and our kids were young, so we went with him. And so we are out there on the road, and one day I approached Gabe, and I'm like, I really want a third baby. I know I said I just wanted two, but I really want a third baby. And he's like, I just don't know. I don't know. And he finally gave in, and I got pregnant. It was so cool the year I got pregnant, because it was 2008. We told Gabe's mom on their anniversary party. I found out 2 days before my birthday, and then the baby was due right after Gabe's birthday. There was all that tied in together. And we were in Texas at the time on a pipeline job. And I don't know if y'all know anything about pipeliners, but they don't have a very good reputation. And we tried to stay straight and narrow, but my husband is easily influenced. We'll leave it at that for now. But I decided, we had a doctor in Texas. We were paying wazoo money to see him. And I didn't like him because you go in and he'd make you lay down, and I'm blind and I can't see nothing. And he's pointing to a screen and saying, see, there's a heartbeat. And I'm like, I can't see that. And so I decided I'm going home. I'm going back to Dr. Holzhauer. He lets me hear it. And on April the 1st, I drove home on April Fool's Day. And I remember going straight across Louisiana because, like I said, it ain't no place. And I finally took a break on the other side, and we got home. We stayed with Gabe's mom for a few days while I found us a place to stay. We were homeless because we've been traveling, and decided I'm gonna hunker down during my pregnancy and stay home. And during all that time, on April 2nd or 3rd, I don't remember exactly, I had some spotting, but I didn't think nothing of it. I know this is TMI, but I just thought, okay, I just probably didn't wipe good enough when I took a dump. That's what that was. And I just, because I've already had 2 kids, I can't even imagine that. Lord, I could never handle that. I could never handle losing a baby. And went on about my business, and I told Rodney about it, and he said, you ain't moving nothing. You're gonna sit down and watch me. Rodney is my brother. And if y'all know nothing about Rodney, if he says you're going to sit down, you're going to sit down. You're not doing nothing. And so I watched him. And I remember on April the 4th, Brittany asked me to watch her kids. Her and her husband had an overlap where they would not quite be home yet. And I'd started spotting while I was there. And I was scared to death. I ended up losing that pregnancy. I was almost out of my first trimester. And I had never cried so hard in my life. I just thought I had cried and been upset before. But that totally devastated me. And that next day I had to go back and Yeah, I learned what a diaper rash felt like because I was having to wear diapers from the amount of bleeding I was having. It was not a normal miscarriage. And I remember when I went into Dr. Holzhauer's office afterwards, he was so compassionate and so nice and friendly. And I didn't sit out in the waiting room but like 5 minutes. And if anybody's had Dr. Holzhauer, you know that in itself is a miracle. And they got me right back, but that 5 minutes felt like 5 hours because there's all these nice, big, beautiful bellies around me, and I just lost my baby. But he got me back there, and we talked about things. Oh, it's just a one-time thing. It'll be okay. You're going to get through this. Mamas love their babies from the moment the stick turns positive. All the things, man, he was just talking it. And anyway, I went home, and I think I stayed in the house a lot more than I care to admit. Because I didn't want to be out. There was pregnant people out there. There was babies. I didn't want to see them. It was too painful. But he told me, wait 2 months. So I did. We got pregnant again. And exactly 3 months later, here we go again. On July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, I took a pregnancy test. The one on the 3rd, by this point, they had come up with these pregnancy tests that actually say pregnant. Like, that blew my mind. And I was like, okay. So anyway, me and Mama and Goat, we celebrated the 4th. Gabe was out on a job somewhere. And I woke up on the 5th, bleeding again. And I was just devastated, like, okay. I called Dr. Holzhauer's office, and he had me come in, and he said, okay, something's not right. You've had 2 kids. This should not be happening. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do all these tests, blah, blah, blah. But we didn't have insurance, so we didn't get to do all these tests. And he said, well, if you get pregnant before, we're going to do this, 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 and this. You're going to be on progesterone and aspirin, and we're going to hope for the best. I was like, well, we're about to go on another job. We're going to Illinois. How am I going to get progesterone there? And he's like, it doesn't matter where you are. I will call you a prescription. You just tell me the name of the pharmacy and their phone number. And so he did. And the thing is, we was coming up on almost another 3 months later. So imagine my fear, thinking, oh Lord, we're about to lose another one. But I prayed and I prayed, and through all of those loss, I had got on a message board called Silent Grief and met so many women that helped me understand that, like, y'all might think I'm crazy because I didn't want to see pregnant women or babies, but they understood because they had those feelings too. And they really helped me through not only that hard 6 months, but they helped me through my pregnancy. Because I don't know if you've been pregnant after a miscarriage, but that is not easy either. And so we did go on to have a baby. Her name is Addison. I've prayed for her. Sometimes I laugh and think, God, I don't know what you had in mind when you gave me her. I know I prayed for her, but I think you're being funny because she is not anything like any of us. She's extra. She is different, but she is my rainbow baby. You know, God has always made us the promise after the storm, that after a storm, he's never going to do that again. So that is why when I call Addison my rainbow baby, it has nothing to do with Gabe. It is everything to do with God. And so we did go on to have Avery Jack as well. I did aspirin and progesterone with him. He was a little bit of a surprise in more ways than one. Like, first we got Addison, who's wild and funny, and then we get Avery, who's a redhead. And the thing about that is, I prayed, y'all, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I prayed with my first 2 kids that they would not have red hair. Aubrey had a little bit of red hair that scared me to death. But my stepfather is redheaded, and I knew his temper and how hard he was to live with. I said, Lord, don't give me a redhead. But he gave me one. And I didn't realize it till he's about 8 hours old. We were sitting in the hospital, and I'm holding him, and everybody finally left, and I'm like, them eyelashes look red. And so I pulled his hat off and looked, and I'm like, that hair is definitely red. I instantly calling Mama and Gabe like, you are not going to believe this. But I would not trade him for the world. He is not my stepfather's attitude. He is the sweetest thing ever. So anyway, through that miscarriage time, even though it was difficult, it was the beginning of where God would start to transform my journey. Y'all stay with me. I know this is long. 36 years is a long time to compile in a few minutes. But on that message board, there was a lady who always had the cutest pictures. Like, they were so good. And I ended up getting a camera and started pursuing photography and self-taught myself photography. And a lot of y'all probably know what I've done, seen what I've done. But it never really was satisfying to me. And I love doing it, and I love the final outcome, but the editing, and I'm going to tell y'all, some of y'all, I've already taken your pictures, and I hate to admit this because some of y'all, I still have to take your pictures. But going into a photo shoot is like so much anxiety because that's not where God called me to be. And going into a shoot just leaves me like, but once I get there, I'm good. Once I get going, I'm good. But there's a lot of dread going up to it because that's just not where he called me to be. And in 2016, he called me to stop. And I was like, what? I thought this was my purpose. Through photography, I also found birth. I didn't even know that was a thing. I so would have had it with Addison, with her story. I so would have had somebody in there taking pictures of that. Because that was a really big deal to me to finally have a baby after all that heartache. But through photography, while I did dread certain aspects of it, I loved pregnancy. I loved birth. I loved being there for those women. At first, you could not get me in certain parts of the room looking at certain things. But through time, like it's just a miracle. Like I remember looking at placenta pictures one day, and people were talking about, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And I'm looking at it like, I even had a lady that, we ain't gonna talk about that anyway. I'll not say that. But I knew the birthing room is where I was supposed to be, because every time a baby was born, my eyes were just bawling. And obviously the mom is too busy, so thankfully she never noticed. But one thing I promised was not only would I quit smoking if I ever got pregnant, but that I would also get in church. God, if you'll just give me a baby, I'm going to get in church. And while I knew these things were important and I needed to be in church, I have a husband that came from a Mennonite church, Church of Christ. And if y'all know anything about that, his mom's church is way different than here. Like, when we first started going to church and we had lights and music and instruments, we were going and burning Crossroads Full Gospel. And I'd get so mad at Gabe because he'd get so drunk the night before. Gabe used to like to drink a lot. And I'm like, what is even the point? Like, and then you go to church and you make fun, saying, this is not church, this is a concert. This ain't blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I just forget it. Just don't go with me, or we'll just stay home. Because I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to deal with this. And so we wishy-washied for a while. And we finally found a church out the way. It was Real Life Church. And that's where I was rebaptized. And where Gabe finally agreed to go to church. He liked the preacher. He liked the singing. It was just a divine miracle. And because he was stubborn, y'all, I'm telling you. But one thing the Lord will do when you get your life right, you just need to be prepared that whatever you've done in your life that's not right, he's going to make you get it right. He's going to work it out. He's going to bring it to the surface, and he's going to make you deal with it. And there were some things that came up, and it put our marriage in a crisis. And here I am thinking, life is good. I've got all my kids. We're in church. Like, we are the bomb. That bomb blew up, y'all. So I knew I forget to mention that. It's in the wrong spot. So yeah, let me go back. I'm sorry, y'all. Yeah, I haven't talked about my dad in a minute, but while I was pregnant with Addison, I had found out that my dad had cancer, and it was esophageal cancer. And just knowing that, I had a newspaper carrier that her husband had that, and he didn't make it. And when I found out that my dad had that, it was just devastating. But, my dad had also had a heart attack when Aubrey was a baby, and he had a 5 bypass, y'all. Yes, and survived it. And so when he got cancer, I went to see him after I heard about the diagnosis, took him to the Western store, and he said, I'm gonna be all right. I'm gonna be all right, sister. He always called me sister. And so I went on about my life. We were up and down for a lot of years. If he was sober, he was good. If he was drunk, he was chewing me out for things that he had no right to chew me out about. And so I went to Ohio. Addison was just a couple months old for mine and Gabe's anniversary. And we spent some time together. And I was just starting to leave to come back home. And my brother called me and he said, Sylvia, Joe's not gonna make it. I'm like, what do you mean he ain't gonna make it? I'm 12 hours away. He's gonna have to hold on. And he said, he's not doing good. Johnny just called me and you need to get there quick. Rodney was in Iraq. You know how hard it is to get a phone call out when you're not even in America? And so, anyway, I called the hospital as quick as I could, and I got his room number. I said, look, Joe, I'm on my way. Don't you go nowhere. You hang tight. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm fine. And I said, okay, I'm just telling you. Better be fine. And I got there, and I spent the next couple months seeing him almost every day. He was transferred to ICU because he got pneumonia. His esophagus was full of holes from the cancer. And there was a time when he had his tube taken out. And I was getting him something one day, I don't remember what it was, but he called me and he said, sister. I said, yes. And he said, I'm sorry. And I looked at him like, this man don't ever apologize for nothing. And I just knew in that moment that he was apologizing for all that stuff, our history. And the next day he was intubated again. And it wasn't long after that he passed away. During that time, a lot of people was like, why would you even go bother to see him after everything he did to you, after everything you've been through, and blah, blah, blah. And my reason was, he is a person, he is a good person when he's not drinking. He had an addiction. The beer had him. And one thing I can say is, he loved me to death. He just did not know how to be a father. And I did that for me so that I could be there. And because I knew once he was gone, I was not getting that chance back. And coincidentally, I had never regretted it. So anyway, we get to the marriage crisis, and this is where I start to turn my back on God again. Why? I thought life was good. What is this? But again, I did not feel good about that. So I went to Vibrant one day, and they have their prayer team, and I had prayer with a lady, and I don't know what all was going on that day in that church, in that prayer, but she didn't know nothing about me. But she was praying things about me and my husband and my kids that I did not tell her. And from that day forward, the marriage crisis became a marriage recovery. And we were healed, and we were able to get past it. But yeah, then we buy this double wide, and I realized real quick that we had bit off more than we can chew, and I think it's time to pursue that nursing degree. And so I did, and the Lord has just literally opened the way. Like He has allowed me to have a Pell Grant. I had my ACT from back in high school. I didn't know why I was taking it at the time, but I took it. And yeah, it's just everything has just been laid out and it's just worked out. And in the spring of 2018, that was a really tough semester. And I went into a deep, deep depression. I can't even explain it. I don't know what, but I know that summer I was not recovering well. But I had a really good friend. She just knew. And Brittany would just come get me from my house and like, come on, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I don't want to. I don't care. I don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want to see nobody. I didn't want nothing to do with nothing. I had a lot on my mind with this felony and wondering, was I truly going to get into nursing school? And I was just ready to give up. But Brittany came and drug me out of my house, and I am forever grateful for that. But it took a lot. When you go that deep into depression, it's hard to come out of it. It's so hard. And if you don't have help, and I didn't, a lot of people here don't even know just how bad it was. A lot of people made assumptions, but I'm a good secret keeper. Y'all just don't know. But I remember in October, I had gotten accepted into nursing school. I was still stressing about that background check. Boy, oh my gosh. And so that stress was still keeping me in a level of depression. And there was one night, I had a lot of hip pain that year, and I had some muscle relaxers from that. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna Google and see what these will do if I just take them all. Like, I'm just tired of this fight. And I Googled it, and this is before I even knew what a muscle relaxer was. But just reading the stuff, I'm like, man, that don't sound good. And something just told me to go flush them, so I did. And from that day forward, I put down the cigarettes, and I marched ahead. I went ahead to our little orientation thing that we had to do for nursing school. And in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, you're not going to make it. Something's telling me you're not going to make it because you're a felon. Like, they don't hire felons. But I have looked at the nursing application part about your criminal background how many times, and nowhere did it say anything about my kind of felony. And so time goes on, and that background check came back, and I was approved. And so that in itself was a blessing. You know, when I started nursing school, I also started Zion Church. And the pastor put me on that front door because I told him that's where I wanted to be. I like my kids, but I don't do well watching other people's kids. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. So I've been a door greeter here for a long time. And when I first came here, I was still recovering from that deep sadness. And then I got nursing school thrown at me. And I remember our first test.
It'll go to sleep.
Miss Harpole was so scary. She was so scary, but I just felt this strong urge to pray, and I didn't. I prayed under my breath. But the next week, Miss West come in. She was not scary at all. She was so comforting and welcoming, and a lot of us did not do that good on our first test. And so she opened up the floor. She said, would anybody like to pray over this test? And y'all, I jumped out of my seat to pray over that test. And I've been praying over tests ever since. And I just keep believing that God did not bring me this far to fail me. Amen. We had our last day of class today. All these girls on the front row, that's it. We don't have to go back and listen to these long lectures anymore. We're done with that. Praise the Lord. We just got one more test. And, you know, I have often thought, for the past 2 years that I've been here, you know, I am not supposed to be here. From day one, the Lord has been trying to knock me out and take me down and take me out. And I just keep getting back up and fighting, not always very well, but I do the best I can. But, you know, me and my mama, when I grew up and I had my own kids, I started to understand a lot about being a mom and just knowing what it means to truly love your kids and do the best you can for them. And you know, that's what the Lord does for us. Jeremiah 1:5 says, I'm going to get it up close because I can't see. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. When they were talking about abortion, he already knew me. He set me apart and appointed me a prophet to his nation. Somebody told me in preceptorship that I would be speaking, and I said, girl, no, you crazy. I don't speak. I've been a nervous wreck all day. I washed my hands with lotion before I came up here. But one of my favorite verses, and I've used it in nursing school, we've had some hard times. Like we've lost classmates, but we've also seen so many miracles. Jalexia is one of my big praying partners. She's so good. And Shaquela and Skyland, we don't just one pray on study group day. Shaquela starts and everybody's quiet while she prays. And then it goes to Jalexia and she prays for forever. And then it goes to Skyland and then it goes to me. And we have just seen so many miracles. We've seen people pass. We've seen 76s become like 81 or 82s, which you need to pass as an 80. And do y'all know how hard it is to bring up a 76 in nursing school? It's like impossible. But this verse is one of my favorites. We can rejoice too that when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance. After endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. And so I just want y'all to know that I am a living testimony. And I am not supposed to be here, but I am. Because God had a very good plan for my life. I couldn't take myself out. The devil couldn't take me out. There was no family member that could take me out. And he brought me through it all. And I'm just so grateful. And I'm so grateful for the people I have beside me. And you know, there's been so much healing. Like when you go through so much, it's so easy. I could have become an alcoholic like my father. But a lot of times y'all won't catch me drinking because I'm afraid of what it will do to me. And so I just stay away from it. I have chosen to stay away from it. I fought my husband for years trying to get him away from it. And praise the Lord, he finally did. But I just want you to know, if anybody here is fighting anything, I've got scar after scar. I like to call them my freckles. They probably all represent something I've been through in my life. And there has always been so many amazing people around me to help carry me through. Brittany, she didn't even know, I'm sure at the time, that I was that bad off. But she went and got me. And then I have made the most amazing friends in nursing school. And then my mama. Y'all, my mama's my best friend. She didn't always make the right decisions, but none of us do. And God has grace for that. And that's why I got that tattoo, because there's nothing in this world that you can do that He cannot save you from.
Amen. Let's give Jesus a hand clap of praise. Come on, you do better than that. Jesus came to the life.